Welcome to the Times of Israel's Friday Focus. Today is Friday, May 16th, day 588 of the war. I'm your host, Deputy Editor Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with our political correspondent, Tal Schneider, filling in for Lazar Berman, who is now on reserve duty. Tal, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda. It's good to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you back. And regular listeners of our sister podcast, The Daily Briefing, will have noticed that you have not been on the podcast for several months because you have been working on a book project. So our conversation today is a bit of a launching pad to explain a little bit of your book project, but we are going to focus today on women warriors. So all of this and more when we're back. And I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, here back with our political correspondent, Tal Schneider. Tal, let's talk about some of the new figures that we've been seeing in the past several weeks in terms of what percentage of women IDF soldiers are actually participating in fighting positions. What's going on here?
Right, Amanda. So the numbers are staggering. We were all, I wouldn't say taken by surprise, but we were amazed to see on October 7th the high volume of participation by women warriors. We all knew they were there, but we've never seen it within our eyes, because this war was so a lot of videos and a lot of pictures, and they've been in roles, in combat roles for a while now, but never participated beyond the front line, beyond the border. So last week, a couple of days ago, the Subcommittee on Human Resources of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee got together in Jerusalem, and the brigadier general that is the head of the human resources of the military was speaking on record, and he said we now have 20.9% women warrior. It means that out of the warriors of the military, at least fifth of them, a little bit more than fifth of them, are women warriors. And obviously the military IDF has lots of soldiers. Most of them are not in frontline roles. They are in, assisting roles, medical roles, human resource, and so on. There's so many roles in the military. But 21% are now women.
Right. In terms of the numbers, we can't give specifics. This is a state secret. But we do know that for every fighting soldier, there should be something like 8 or 9 support personnel supporting this particular fighter. So if we're talking about 20% of the fighting force, 21 almost being women, it's really a staggering number in terms of the holistic look at the army. But obviously, it wasn't always that case. And though, of course, women participated in the battles to create the state of Israel in the War of Independence, there was no getting around that fact. Of course, it was all hands on deck. Everyone was participating. But after the formation of the state, really for decades and decades, women didn't have this kind of fighting role. And it just really started about 2 decades ago. And there's one particular case that came to the Supreme Court that really, in a lot of ways, opened the door for all of this to happen. And that's the case of Alice Miller. Can you talk to us about Alice Miller? Who was she?
Exactly. That was a precedent, like a turning point case. A young woman named Alice Miller, she wanted to become a pilot. The military said, no, excuse me, we're not giving the chances to become a pilot for women. because there is no women in combative forces in Israel. And she said, would you at least give me the chance to participate in a tryout in what we call gibush, in the process where you check up the people. She said, check me up, let's see if I'm capable. And the military said, no, we are not going to give you the spot to check your capability just because you want to. It's unheard of. She took it to the high court, and she was she was a civil aviator specialist after she's already studied aviation engineering. So she took it to the high court. The high court said, you have to treat people in the same manner, with equal rights, and you cannot take into consideration those economic consideration where you don't have a spot, you do have a spot, and so on. They let her. She had a meeting with the chief IDF. She was given the chance. She went into the training, but she failed pretty early on, and she was a dropout after a short while. However, the president remained, and after her, many women flew into pilot training, Navy training, and so on and so forth. Step by step, those women took it to the court and opened up another combat role and another combat role. The late president came about 10 years ago, where women wanted to serve as tanks, as fighters, not as an instructor or, as you said, helping, assisting manpower. They wanted to be in the combat role. They had to go to the high court as well. The IDF was, the court kind of twisted their arms into opening the tanks. Many people in Israel, conservative people, took it to the media to complain and say, one of Israel's heroes, Avigdor Kahalani, the brigadier who fought in 1973 and won those awards and for his bravery. He took it to the media and said, would you imagine a woman being wounded in the fighting and not having a hand or a leg, or die at war? He was troubled, and he was taken aback. He said it's impossible. But the court did not listen to those voices, and the court listened to the women, and many of them went into tanks training. They went into combat intelligence training. They went into what we call Caracal. It's a light infantry mixed battalions whose their original mission is to guard Israel's border. It's like a special combative border patrols. However, they took the fighting on October 7th, the specific Caracal battalion. The women in the tanks participated in the fighting. And then we saw many others, rescue missions, rescue battalions, who are, on regular days, they're supposed to help when a building collapses or something like that. But they went into Gaza together with the Caracal, with the infantry, and together with the tanks. So they all took part. And, we felt, people who cover the war and who are following closely whatever is going on in the military, we felt on October 7th, it's a watershed moment for those women, because the military, even though letting them be in combat role, was very hesitant as per deploying them into war. And October 7th was just this moment where things were so chaotic. No commander, some of the places, no commanders were on site, and they just took it to rescue and help and fight. No one stopped them. So because of the chaos on that specific day.
Right. Because of this particular chaotic day, of course, it's much more in our consciousness that there are these women fighters. But in fact, the unit that you just mentioned, Caracal, and the other three cats that are the units that protect the borders. There's Bardelas, there's also Levi, all sorts of cats names, 4 different units.
There are 5 different battalions which have mixed men and women, the percentage is about between 60 to 70% women in all of those mixed battalions. That's a big number of women serving in combat roles. And also, obviously, you have officers, and one of those 5 battalions commander is already a woman, Or Ben Yehuda. She was in the fighting herself in Sufa, in the southern part of the area of what we call the Gaza envelope.
But the point is, Tal, that they, of course, didn't sprout out of the ether. They've been around. These women have been trained. And these units, there were 4, and now there are 5, as you said, have been around for the past 20 years almost in various formations, including slowly, as you said, the tank unit. And the women in the tank unit were valorous fighters on October 7th, as you mentioned. And of course, they're officers because they were trained within these frameworks of these mixed units. Regular listeners of the podcast know that I have 3 children who are now serving in the IDF. 2 of them serve in these mixed units, one in Caracal, as you mentioned, and my daughter in the search and rescue unit. And just anecdotally, it really appears to me that the women, at least in the search and rescue unit that she's in, are really the main officers. In fact, they are definitely taking up the leadership mantle and really making names for themselves in this particular unit. But as you also said, for the most part, when there are units that are going to go across the state of Israel's borders, these are not the units that are going to be called upon first. And there's a variety of reasons for that. You touched on some of the societal pressures with, of course, nobody wants to see a woman with one arm. Nobody wants to hear about women soldiers getting raped and tortured. These are very real concerns. But there's also, honestly, Tal, there's obviously a physiological difference between women and men. We cannot deny it that for the most part, women are not as strong as men, and so perhaps not as suited to go into specific situations as men. And we're seeing that in different units where the women may have fought and won the right to try out for these units, but they're not necessarily at the level in order to finish the training. So let's talk about the more specialized units right now. And I'm talking about Sayeret Matkal or 669. Let's talk about these units. What's happening there right now?
Can I say a short note about you just said so many things, and I wanted to refer to the issue of rape in captivity, because for many, many years, since 1948 up until 2023, that was one of the biggest argument against women serving as pilots. The common phrase was, what will happen if this woman pilot will, be taken in captivity? How can we ensure she's not being raped? And then came October 7th, and around 110 women and girls, civilians, were taken into captivity, something that we have never experienced. And among them, 7 young soldiers. One was rescued very early on, and a second was murdered in captivity in a hospital, inside a hospital in Gaza City. And then the rest 5 of them, the Tatzpitaniyot, the women who are doing their, the women who are watching the borders, they stayed in captivity for around 480 days. And then, I'm mentioning that because the issue of women in captivity is also, unfortunately, it's a discourse that is beyond us because it took place, it happened. The other question was about, how the society in Israel is reacting to that. And you have a lot of, conservative powers who are not happy with the progress. But then what we see, and this was also in the numbers, from the religious society in Israel, what we call the religious Zionism, those groups, they can volunteer into the military. I'm talking about the young women at the age of 18. They can volunteer to the military, but they can also come up and say, excuse me, I am a religious woman and I'm not going to go into the military. Now, it's under the Israeli law. You can sign an affidavit and say, I am a religious woman, I will only do community service, and that's it. But apparently, in the last couple of years, together with the rise in the numbers of secular women, the numbers also have risen for those religious women, and now they are taking place as, at least 30% of the soldiers are now choosing not to sign this affidavit. I'm talking about religious women. They choose not to sign the affidavit, but they choose to do just regular military. And that includes also a lot of combat roles because, they see their neighborhoods and society. So, that's a big change as well.
Just to jump in here anecdotally, I know several young women in this situation. And one of the main reasons, people such as my daughter and many of her friends could have been in the intelligence. They could have sat behind desks. Their Arabic capabilities would have allowed them to. They tested into these different positions, but they wanted to have the meaningful service, just like their brothers, just like their friends. It's definitely a trend in Israeli society that the women feel as capable and they want to just give of themselves, to serve as much as their siblings.
Exactly. The spike in the numbers is across the board. It comes from religious and from secular, from, city girls to Moshavni girls to kibbutzniks to people from the settlements. It's across the board. And one of the most interesting things that, happened during the committee discussion is someone, one of the members of the Knesset asked the committee chair and the IDF representative also, what did the military do to encourage that? Because they are trying to figure out how to encourage young ultra-Orthodox boys to go into the military. They asked the military representative, what did you do to make that happen? Did the women just came from within themselves? And I'm telling you, Amanda, this is the big story here, because the IDF did not encourage that. The IDF didn't even want that. It took place in kind of an undercurrent where some of these women had to take it to the high court in order, you had to hire a lawyer in order to be a tank commander in Israel. And it goes to both ways, religious and secular women. So not only that the IDF did not, engage and encourage, it just happened because they were feisty and fighty enough to even hire a lawyer and pay for this argument with the military. And the current argument that we have these days is, you asked about special units just like a few minutes ago. So there is a discussion, there is a court hearing as we speak those days about what's going to take place in what we call Sayeret Matkal, that's the IDF General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, or Unit 669, that's the IDF Elite Airborne Search and Rescue Unit, or Yahalom. Yahalom, it's the IDF Combat Engineering Unit. It's also a commando unit that is doing the tunnels, for example. It's engineering unit. It's a very special, specific Israeli elite engineering unit. So women have said to the High Court, we are not settling for just boots on the ground with the tanks or the Caracal light infantry. We also want to be in special units. And the court said to the military, to the IDF, open it up. What are you planning to do? So they did open what they call now a pilot. They say in the IDF, we are not going to let them just jump in and just take part. We are going to do some trials. The trials may take a year or two because we want to check on their physical adjustment and on their mental adjustment and so on. So they opened up Sayeret Matkal, they opened up Yahalom and 669. Two units, 669 and Matkal, the women some women, a very small number, like 3, have started the entire process and failed, meaning they started it with the men, and after a couple of weeks, they are dropouts. They were unable to, stand up to the norms and the level of the training.
But I just want to jump in here, Tal, because most men can't complete this training as well.
That's true.
In the case of Alice
tough.
Miller, case of Alice Miller, the pilot as well, most men get kicked out along the way. The percentage of those who start the course and finish the course are astronomically different, right? And so, of course, with Matkal, as you mentioned, and 669, the rigors of the training, and this is a long training. It's something what, 16
very
months,
true.
something like that?
Yeah, it's 16 or 18 months. That's true. However, let's remember that Alice Miller failed, but opened up the door for many after her to follow up. And also the military adjusted themselves. For example, those women, they're not giving any slack. They're not giving any changes in the program. They have to stand up to the same norms and standards. However, you might want to take into consideration some of the women that are coming from homes who are not supporting what they're doing. So the mental situation on those women, at least the first women who are the pioneers, is very, very tough also, Amanda, and this is mind-blowing. The military doesn't have different outfit for women. So they have to use the men outfit, for example.
You mean clothing? That's what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this, so it's not just, clothing and equipment may change your training, because you may be, you may have hard times if you don't have the right shoes or the right uniforms and so on, adjusted to your body weight and to your body measures. So I think when the military is doing those pilots, those trials, they also learn along the way how can you don't have to change the rules of climbing a wall or running fast enough, but you can actually help them with mental preparation around the house or with at least fair equipment. And that will come along the road. I mean, it's not happening yet. And I said about Yahalom unit, the diamond, what we call the diamond unit, the IDF combat engineering unit, the women did not fail that training. So they actually have a unit of, I think, around 15 women who already finished their training period of about 18 months or so, and they are they are now capable of participating. So you see two units which it didn't go well yet. Only very small amount of women over there, and then one unit, a special unit, when it went well. And while we talk about it, most of the IDF infantry brigades, Golani, Givati, Kfir, you know the names maybe. That's the big infantry. It's the big military part who's doing the boots on the ground, They are closed for women.
And paratroopers as well, of course.
Parakolani, paratroopers, Givati, Kfir, Nachal, all of those units. That's the real kind of military, the boots on the ground, the gruesome type of work. They're not there yet. What they did is they actually opened up what they called mobility unit in those Tzanchanim, for example, the paratroopers. They have this small group of mobility unit. They said we can open this part for women, and right now as we speak, there is a first group of around 30 soldiers, women soldiers, who are participating in a trial, in a pilot, to become mobility unit under paratroopers. It means that they will be the one who will be driving the armored vehicles to rescue, or they will be driving those like little cars that you drive in on the fields to bring food in, to rescue people, to help, to assist, to just like drive around from one spot to another. Those are open to women. That's a very, very new, development.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
It's really fascinating everything you're saying, and especially as a mother of a woman warrior. One of the things that stood out to me is, of course, in her unit, she's search and rescue. There are different standards for the physical testing of the men and the women. The men have to do a certain number of pull-ups, and the women do many fewer with a rubber band to assist them. The physical standards are clearly different for this unit, also for Caracal, where my eldest son serves. And it causes a lot of derision within the army, within the soldiers, within the army. And I see, of course, my daughter's twin brother, who's in one of the elite units of the paratroopers, that he just looks down on these mixed units so much and says they're just not capable, and any opportunity he's had to work within them or work alongside them, he's just completely derided their abilities. So this too is a cultural situation, even within one little Dan family.
But there's a lot of problems with that. And it's obvious that there will be some people who will not like it or will downgrade it. But having said that, one of the new approaches in the military is that you have to get the right person into the right job according to his or her capabilities. And I've talked to one of the battalion commanders of the tanks, and I asked him about this, this approach of matching a person to the right job. And he told me, he said, during the war, and we're talking about October 7th, he was a commander of those women in the tanks. By the way, he's a paratrooper. He doesn't know how to drive a tank. However, he went into one of the tanks to assist them, and they were like, "Don't disturb us. We're just like doing our job. We're shooting. We're running over terrorists. Just don't disturb. Just sit in quiet." So he said that their brain power and their real and quick understanding of the situation, and the quick grasp of the reality for those women was much faster than he ever knew with his male soldiers. So he said to me, and this is coming from the commander, that's not me saying, he said that. He said, they may be physically a bit behind in some of those missions, but when it comes to understanding the field or obeying or being disciplined, they were very much ahead of the group. And I worked with them because they were so fast in realizing so what I'm saying here is that in order to be a good soldier and then a good commander, it's not just about the physics. There are more characteristics that you have to bring into the job. And the IDF is now using this approach to say, okay, you are unable to run as fast, but if you do your other tasks so good, it compensates. Within a unit that is a mixed unit, we can play around with those different way of working. And it's working very good for us.
Right. The brains and the bronze can balance each other out, essentially, is what you're saying. And there are a couple other topics I just want to quickly talk about because our time is short. One is, of course, that in order to accommodate these new women fighters, new women's bathrooms and new women's dorms were needed to be created at all these different bases. And just one further wrinkle to just mention and put to the side, there are, of course, trans soldiers now. And there was one trans soldier with one of my soldier children, and this person had to have entirely separate accommodations as well. So there are all sorts of logistical issues, showers, bathrooms, dorms that are needed to be created for each of these different units. And especially at a place like Beit Lead, where the paratroopers are, they just don't have these facilities for women at all. Now, put that together with the other major problem facing the army right now, and that is, of course, as you mentioned before, the ultra-Orthodox who are not conscripting, who are not enlisting, and they need a woman-free zone. So it is such a very complicated logistical balance. And what are you seeing happening in this sphere, Tal?
Right. So one of the decisions made by the High Court, as we said, it was all, dropped on the military from the High Court, saying you cannot take economic or financial considerations when you make up your mind if you want women or not, because the military can come up and say, excuse me, I'm not going to change the bathrooms because there's only one woman, and then what? And the idea, the Supreme Court told them, money is not the question. You need to get around this and find solutions. And again, when I talked to one of those commanders on the ground, he told me sometimes when you need to come up with a solution on, for example, bathrooms, you just need to let the soldiers figure it out. You don't have to dictate everything to them. They can come up with arrangements, and they do. And when you ask specific about transgenders, he also told me about 2 of his soldiers that are transgenders in border patrol area. And they came up with a solution. He decided not to mend into their business. And they came up to him and said, we're going to have women hour, men hour, and then we're going to have a 3rd shift of transgender hour. And that's just worked for them. And they did it. They just did it by themselves without, being told what to do. So sometimes when you draw too much lines and too much, you go too much into the details, it's just hurtful to them. You just need to, they're 18 to 21 years old. They can work it out themselves. As per the big question is about religious soldiers in Israel, obviously ultra-Orthodox, but not just them. It's also religious soldiers. Many religious soldiers, this is an argument that is going on for about 15 to 20 years now, with their rabbis in the back. They keep on saying, I'm not going to go into a tank with a woman. This is a limited scope of area. We cannot sit, we are not married, we cannot sit together with women in the same close borders sometimes for a week, where you have to do your business in the tank and you cannot get out because you're in a war zone. So the military came up with this concept a couple of years ago of gender separated units. So the women in the tanks, for example, they are just in the same tank. You will have only women. It's a 4-person type of vehicle, the tank. So only there's one woman will be the driver, the other one will be the commander, and so on. It is with all those 4 tasks that they have to do there. But taking it from the war. Again, as I told you earlier, the commander that I was talking about, who was a paratrooper, he entered into a tank to help the women. He is a religious person, by the way. And he spent hours with them inside the tank. And when you have war, it's war. You don't have to really think about those gender-separated units. Having said that, the gender-separate units is something that when you don't have wartime, when you have peacetime, it's also some of the things that rabbis and other, outer groups of the military, they bug the military with that. They send a lot of questions. And we heard in the same committee that I was mentioning earlier, we heard from them that actually in the artillery, in the what we call totchanim, the artillery corps, many religious men are choosing not to join this corpse anymore because they think that they will have to serve together with women, and that's not really a good a good outcome of the situation. Also, because there is, as I said earlier, there's a spike in the number of religious women. Some of the religious women came up to the military and said, why would you allow men to have gender separated units? We want them also. So, for example, IDF Combat Intelligence Collection Corps, that's intelligence that are doing field, frontline military. They have to be really trained. Now the military is opening up an IDF Combat Intelligence Collection Corps for women only. So that's another, I would say it's a worrisome development where the military is going to be divided by ultra-Orthodox and then by secular and then by gender-based groups. It's not the best, it's not the best outcome, I think. But that's the situation for now. It's not all over the place. We have the Caracals and the rescue troops who are mixed, and then some of those battalions, they open up one small unit of around 30 people that will allow them to be women only and do the training and then do the military services on women. It's going to be actually religious women only. So they're going to have they have, according to what I've heard, they need spiritual kind of, not, I wouldn't say spiritual training, but kind of a spiritual someone who will go along the road with them and help them to figure out issues. So they do it like for religious young men.
It's such a huge topic. We've touched on any number of different units, and not all of them. We didn't talk about the Okits unit, which of course is the dogs unit. There are many more fronts to discuss. And Tal, I wish you great success with the book that you're working on.
Thank you.
And it'll come out in Hebrew, I imagine, but hopefully in English as well.
Yep, first in Hebrew, then in English. It's going to take a couple of months because it's not ready yet. But I have interviewed many of the women that went to combat on October 7th and took part in some unfortunately died in combat. And so you have all of those stories that I'm planning to lay out. How did they fight on that day, and then discuss obviously a bit about the Supreme Court and involvement in all of this process, because it's happened due to Supreme Court decisions.
Right. And for those who don't know, Tal is also a trained lawyer. So I look forward to reading this book, and we will discuss it once it comes out. Tal, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Friday Focus. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by The Podwaves and video edited by Thomas Gersh. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week. Shalom.